The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. This is the best time to be alive as an African, if only you understand what is happening around the world. People have controlled the world for a very long time, and they still want to keep that power to continue to control the world. But in this information age, things are not helping them. There is a big fight among EU members. They are not knowing peace, restlessness, because majority of their members are rising against their own people, exposing the lies they have told to the world for all these years. We believe in these people so much, especially Africans, and we believe that they have the final say. And this is how they want the world to believe. And now that the world is changing and people are bringing out all the misinformation and lies in whatever they are doing, they have to find another strategy in order to control us so they can continue to have the final say. But this is not helping. EU brought out a new policy, and it is for misinformation. According to them, they want to control so that people will stop misinforming us the more. And they are doing this under the guise of democracy. According to them, democracy is dying. And for that matter, they have to do everything possible in their power to continue to hold on to democracy so the world can continue to buy into their democracy. According to Claire Daly, these people are lying. That we see that disinformation, whatever, it is for them to continue to control the world. That anything that is bad or they do not like is Russia.
In this building a couple of weeks ago, downstairs, the Irish Commissioner, the main man, Michael McGrath is his name, he's responsible for rule of law in the European Union, and he addressed the plenary session of the European Parliament. And he told MEPs on that day that democracy is the founding value of the European Union, together with respect for rule of law and fundamental rights. He told them that freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, and the right to participate in democratic life are enshrined in EU treaties, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, EU legislation, and common constitutional traditions of member states. And he then went on and told them that citizens should be able to form their own opinions in a public space where there is access to reliable information from a plurality of sources with different views which can be expressed, where political discussions can be confronted, and where it's possible to disagree with one another. Powerful stuff indeed. Who in hell would disagree with that? But it's so brazenly out of touch with reality that I think many people would have found themselves scratching their head and going, where is this utopia that he's talking about? And none more so than myself and my colleague, former MEP Mick Wallace, who's also here today, who know the Commissioner well. And we knew him from our time in the Irish Parliament, and he never stood out then as a crusader for democracy. In fact, he was a member of successive governments which were entirely actually undemocratic in their nature. And his newfound interest in democracy actually was, you know, kind of particularly uncharacteristic until you looked at the title of the debate that he was introducing, and it was called "The Hungarian Government's Drift to Russian-Style Repression, Legislative Threats to Freedom of Expression and Democratic Participation." In other words, in layman's terms, this is the ongoing standoff between the centrist parties which have ruled Europe for decades now, who call themselves liberal, and the so-called illiberal regimes on the other hand, led by Hungary's President Viktor Orban. And then McGrath's words make sense, because the real reason why the EU leadership stands so staunchly in defending free speech in Hungary is that it's speech that they agree with. And it's an entirely different matter if you have speech which they don't agree with. And that is the context of the European Union's disinformation policy. It's the fundamental point that people have to understand. It has nothing to do with democracy. It's a tactic that they use for people they don't like. And first and foremost, and most importantly, it is to clamp down on dissent, on those who would have the audacity to challenge those people who are in power. And so we have this fable of the EU's official platform for its disinformation obsession, that our democracies are under attack from malign foreign actors who want to spread disinformation, to undermine our societies and our governments, to influence our elections, to put us all against each other and break down our unity. And to stand up to this terrible threat, we have to defend our democracy by cracking down on disinformation and promoting unity in the European Union. It's absolute and utter nonsense from start to finish. Of course, foreign interference exists. Of course, states have the right to defend themselves from outside influence seeking to undermine them for the benefit of themselves. But Russian bots didn't sway European elections. Their outcomes were very firmly determined by domestic matters. Look, we all know that all states do propaganda. But what I found when I was a member of the INGA committee, which was the Committee on Foreign Interference in all democratic processes in the European Union, including disinformation, which I was the coordinator on the left group for 3 very long years, I can tell you. But from my experience on that committee, the problem wasn't propaganda that actually came from external sources or foreign governments. The problem was narratives domestically that they didn't agree with. And I suppose I have to be honest now and confess at this stage that I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm actually a Russian propagandist, believe it or not, according to a Ukrainian hit list or whatever. And the 2 reasons why I'm a Russian propagandist is, I said 2 things. One, that the war in Ukraine was a NATO proxy war. And the second, that the people of Europe were suffering more than the Russian economy from the sanctions that Europe had imposed on Russia. Now, I happen to stand over both of those things still, but rather than engage with me on the content of those issues, on the fact that Stoltenberg came in here and told us that NATO provoked the war, on the pauperising reality for European citizens crushed under the cost of living issue, rather than discussing those issues with me and taking responsibility as the European leaders who brought them in, it's much easier to smear me as a Russian agent or a Russian propagandist. And that is what the European Union's disinformation policy is designed to do, to silence anyone who questions their narrative, the official narrative. And to do that, they even have a toolkit to whip us into line, to suppress certain kinds of speech and to manage the kinds of information that are allowed to circulate in our society. So if you question their COVID policy, you're an anti-vaxxer. If you criticise Israel's genocide, you're anti-Semitic. And if you argue for peace in the war in Ukraine, well then you're a Kremlin stooge or something like that. That's basically what's going on here. And how the European Union is going to deal with that disinformation comes under the Defence of Democracy package. They used to call it when I was here. I mean, did you ever? It's just pathetic. It's even been rebranded worse now. It's the European Democracy Shield. I mean, where do these people get off? And the committee is even called the European Democracy Shield Committee. And you literally could not make this stuff up. And the whole basis of it is that ideas are now dangerous and they pose a fundamental threat to our democracy, allegedly. The public sphere, the media, social media, where our society learns about itself and public opinion is shaped. This is now a battleground. Words and ideas are weapons. And the European liberals are here to save us from that, to defend us from these outrageous attacks. And let's be honest about it, despite the fact that this has accelerated massively since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has always been a programme of repression by the European political establishment. And up until now, the toolkit has been kind of a soft form of repression, really. They had a number of tactics. You can read about them in the Inga report, which is the report of the old committee that I was on. But the approach at that time was kind of to do stuff like drown out dissenting narratives with propaganda in support of the official EU narrative. Now, when we do it, it's not propaganda, of course. It's called strategic communications because we're the good guys. But that was what they used to do there. Then they sought to co-opt social media platforms to de-rank narratives they don't like. And then they've pumped funding into these so-called fact-checking organisations to police online discourse. Now, we warned about this. They even toyed with the idea of making contradicting governments a crime. Did you ever? They had to back away from that one because that would be even a little bit too far to go, and you'd have to bring in legislation and a court case to deal with that. And this is where the European Union's 17th set of sanctions comes into play, because what you have here is sanctions targeting disinformation, hybrid sanctions they call them. The first package was in December. We've had 2 more since then.
And this misinformation is anything that other people say outside of the truth that they give. So they want us to continue to believe that they have the final truth. So everything that they say is the truth and nothing but the truth. So when you finally come out to tell the world the lies in whatever they told us, then they say you are misinforming the world. So this is now a war to control people, because they told us that democracy is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of everything. So why is it that now people are not allowed to give their opinion on certain issues that has to do with ourselves? Africans, we believe so much in these people. And whatever they tell us is what we believe. There are a lot of Africans who believe that Russia is the reason to which we are seeing all these things in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because they instigated them to do this. And that is the reason to which they have moved away from the West and they are with Russia. But we have never sat down to ask ourselves as a people, for how many years have we been in contact with these people? What has been our fate? They come in the guise of helping Africa. They come in the guise of democracy, that they are protecting us. But all these years, have their protection helped us? They say they are fighting corruption, they are fighting bad leadership, and that is why they rise against leaders who they think that they are not practicing democracy. But have we asked ourselves, is this truly fighting for the African or fighting for themselves? Is it helping us or is helping them? There are a lot of things that we do not know about these people, and people are bringing their lies out. That it is never in any interest of democracy, because under a democratic world, we are allowed to tell our own version of our understanding concerning issues. But in this world that we are living in the guise of democracy, it's just a few people that are deciding for us, to the point that they decide who should lead the African and even impose certain things on us. So how can people of this who said they are practicing democracy and they are protecting democracy be autocratic, dictate to the African? Look at the trumu things that they brought to Africa, that we rose against it. They said if we don't accept it, they are going to be imposing sanctions on us. Are these people democratic? So we need to understand the game they are playing on us in this world. And I'm glad that their own members are bringing out things concerning these people, that this organization we are seeing and the people are only there for their own power and not for you and I. Because they don't care what happens to you, the ordinary people. So the democracy that they sold to us is not actually democracy. But we don't understand the game they are playing to us. And that is the reason to which Captain Ibrahim Traore said, we are no longer in a democratic era, but in a revolutionary era. And they are always afraid for people rising to overthrow them. They don't want especially Africans to gain their power. That is why they are painting Russia black to us, so we wouldn't love Russia. But any African who loves Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso will believe in Russia, will love Russia, and will support Russia. Because Russia is the reason to which what we are seeing in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso is still ongoing. Without Russia, we wouldn't be seeing all this. With them, by now, all these things have come to an end, because this is what they do to all the African leaders who rose to fight for the true freedom of Africa. We are not free, and we need to start working and fighting for our own freedom. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. So that's the latest around the world in Europe and in Irish.